Dear colleagues, good morning. We begin our work. The first topic is also the work of the Parliament. We have Oleksii Koshel, who is Director General Committee of Voters of Ukraine, also Denis Rybachok, Analyst Committee of Voters of Ukraine. The floor is yours. Good morning, dear colleagues. Committee of Voters of Ukraine would like to make a presentation of our report within the project of research project. This is the project that analyzes all political promises and how they work on the coalition agreement, and also how they perform as to the promises, campaign promises, and also results of the work in the parliament. During this fall, we published 3 reports about implementation of campaign promises on reforms on decentralized social policy, results of the work of 2 years of the Parliament. Today we would like to dwell on results of the work of the Parliament for the last year. We have the last plenary sessions, and so there are all the bases, all the grounds to publish and to analyze how efficient was the work of the Parliament during this year. I would like to emphasize that in our work we emphasize not only on quantity parameters, but we analyze the quality of legislation. So of those draft laws that were brought in by deputies groups and factions, we have to analyze the work of the Parliament for the last year. What are the starting points? First of all, during all the work of this Parliament, they registered a record number of draft laws. In 2 years, they registered 4,600 draft laws. If to look at number of days of plenary sessions and results of the work of the Parliament, we can say that 4,600 draft laws, that is an unrealistic number to consider at plenary sessions. So, in such a case, the Parliament should consider 37 draft laws every day or every 12 minutes of their work. They should consider new draft laws. Unfortunately, the number of draft laws doesn't meet quality. Quantity doesn't meet quality, and very often that complicates the work of the Parliament. And that's a big burden on parliamentary committees, and this is the number of draft laws which is unrealistic to consider. If we look at previous parliaments, what is the picture? For example, in 4 years of the third parliament, 4 years, and they registered 3,600. But now, for 2, we have 4,600. If we are to compare the parliament of the 8th convocation with the previous parliament, the 7th, we'll see that in a year and 10 months, they registered 3,900 draft laws. Now, 4,600. 6th convocation, 2,500, and 1,600, and in the 4th, less. So they made the record as to the number of draft laws, but that doesn't automatically bring to the better quality of the Parliament. That's why our organization also emphasizes that we should introduce some amendments to the legislation. Also, we should make it complicated. Legislative work should be more complicated, and we have to change the approach to the subject of legislative initiative. And among them, we have, it shouldn't be an MP, one MP, but MPs. And there shouldn't be less than the smallest faction in the parliament. In such a way, MPs will not register draft laws just for PR, for their promotion. They have to find the support of their colleagues. As a result, we will get more realistic draft laws of better quality, and will reduce the number of such negative phenomena which we call legislative spam, because very often draft laws are registered with the goal of self-advertisement of MPs. If we look at the quality of draft laws, What MPs produce? What kind of draft laws do they produce? I would like to remind that according to the regulation of the Cabinet of Ministers from August 2014, Ministry of Finance is responsible for providing expertise to draft laws as to whether they can be funded during the budget year. So every draft law which is registered in the Parliament should be considered by the Ministry of Finances, and they should give their conclusions as to how realistic those draft laws are. Committee of Orders of Ukraine, we spoke to the Ministry of Finances, and we received main conclusions, which state that in 2 years, Ministry of Finances considered 4,583 draft laws, and among them 1,579 are considered impossible for implementation. In other words, every third draft law which is registered by MPs is unrealistic because there will be lack of funds. These numbers are quite complicated, and that allows us to say that the Parliament is drowned in the financial populism when they register draft laws which are unrealistic for implementation. Our organization, on the basis of those numbers, we analyzed who among parliamentary factions and groups who brought in unrealistic draft laws at the conclusion of the Ministry of Finances, and that allows us to have the rating of financial populism. The leader of the rating of populism, the faction of oppositional bloc, 53 draft laws of that faction are impossible to implement as at the conclusion of the Ministry of Finances. So every second law of the oppositional bloc is unrealistic because there is no money for the implementation. In other words, their political force, they use the Parliament to strengthen their political or populistic promises. Second place in financial populism is shared by Vedrochny and the will of people. They registered 47 and 45% of draft laws which are unrealistic to implement. The third in financial populism, there is the faction of Batkyivshchina. Every 35% of draft laws from the faction of Batkyivshchina are impossible for implementation. Next one. In the rating, the fourth place, Radical Party of Oleg Lashko and bloc of Petro Poroshenko, 1/3 of draft laws. Each gets 33%, and the last place belongs to Narodny Front and Samopomich. They got 29%. So our rating shows that populism is a key problem of this parliament, and that's why we developed the rating of financial populism. And it shows that we needed to change the approach to legislative work. We should oblige MPs when they register draft laws to clearly state how much it will cost to implement that draft law and where MPs plan to get funds to implement those draft laws. Also, we analyzed which factions support, how they vote for draft laws, and which factions support draft laws, so-called resultative draft laws in the parliament. So draft laws which turn into laws. In 2016, the Parliament passed 160 draft laws, and 85 were initiated by MPs, 23 by the President, 53 by the Cabinet of Ministers. If we look at factions that supported draft laws which became laws, we see that the most often factions of the coalition voted for that, and that is quite natural. The coalition supports resultative votes. But if we look at the results of the vote, we come to the conclusion that de facto the old coalition European New Ukraine de facto is working. So from among past draft laws, in general, they voted 77% of MPs from Народный Front voted the highest. 71 from Petro Poroshenko bloc. Samopouch, which went to the opposition, they supported 65 votes for draft laws which became laws. 54% was supported by Radical Party of Oleksii, and the same number was achieved by Verkhovna. So, despite declarations about that they are in opposition, some opponents, Radical Party of Oleksii and Verkhovna Party, they supported a three-fourths of draft laws that were voted in the Ukrainian parliament and became laws. Very often, 50% of new oppositional parties voted, but very often they gave about 70% of votes. Former members of the coalition, they became authors of draft laws from Petro Poroshenko. They were authors of 65% of laws, and people Народный Front 61, Самопомощь 35, Батьківщина 27, Radical Party of Oleksii 24. And also deputy MPs from different factions could be among initiators of a law. So the old team in the parliament is working. There's a proof. The main negative votes in the parliament, there is factions of oppositional bloc and the Vidrozhenia group. In the average for the past during the votes, they supported only 26% of oppositional bloc. So one of the main conclusions that we emphasize that the oppositional bloc is working in the format of boycott. They don't support the draft laws, despite the fact that those draft laws could be a part of the political position. And if we analyzed the votes for draft laws as the two participants of ATO, and we emphasized that in elections 2014, oppositional bloc, many times they emphasized in their programs and in the main campaign slogans that political force would work to support Ukrainian armed forces, militarymen, and participants of ATO. But in practice, they have zero votes. They provided 0 votes for such draft laws. Thank you. Denis, the floor is yours. In 2016, in the parliament passed 160 laws, and that is 2 times less than the previous year. In 2015, they passed 350 laws. And that 160, that is the lowest results during last 10 years. So we see that the capability of the parliament to pass the laws is slow compared to with the previous year. But there is a problem of a big number of registered draft laws. And the problem is not only that those draft laws are just registered. The problem is that they have no chance, so many of them have no chance to become laws. In 2016, among the 1,500 draft laws, only 160 turned into real laws. That's 10%. 10% of draft laws turn into laws. All the rest stay, they're not considered even. And also there's an issue of the quality of the passed laws, because 75% of all the laws passed in 2016. There was other laws that brought amendments to other laws. So only 25%, and there was a full-fledged laws which regulate some new area, but not change the existing. The reason is quite visible, obvious. The legislation is of quality. Very often the parliament passes a law, and then in several weeks or months they understand that they forgot something, they did something wrong, and that's why that requires amendments. That's what we have. As to topics of laws that they supported in 2016, 3 priorities in the parliament. The first, industrial economic policy, 17 laws they passed. Second, security and defense, 16 laws, and the third, corruption fight and crime fight, 14 laws. They passed 14 laws. Also, we analyzed how factions in the parliament voted for laws on different topics. And we came to quite interesting conclusions. For example, only half of factions from Batkyvshchina voted for social support of military men, so 50%. Only oppositional bloc has lower support. Usually they gave 6% of their votes for laws on social support of military men. Again, if we open campaign programs of 2014 of the opposition bloc, that was one of the promises that they would support military men. They would do everything for their social support. In other factions, the situation is the following. 78% from Samopoch voted, 77% from Narodny Front, 69% from Petro Poroshenko bloc, 67% from the Radical Party of Oleksii, only 50% from Batkyvshchina, and 6% of deputies from the opposition bloc. I would like to emphasize that those laws we are discussing now, they should not be conflicting laws, because that's about providing some benefits for military men. For example, additional vacations or exemption from fees like court fee or military fee. And we are surprised that Batkyvshchina faction that states that they support military men, but nevertheless, only half of the deputies vote for such laws. Only 11 MPs from Batkyvshchina voted for the law 615, which provided to 8 military men benefits to pay for their community fees. That is utilities fees. That's the topic they are specialized. But when it comes to the vote for such a law, we see that half of the faction of Batkyvshchina is voting for. And that is a contrast with the promises that they gave. As to the oppositional bloc, I have to say that, in fact, that faction built the work in the parliament in the format of boycott. Among 160 laws, the oppositional bloc didn't give any vote for 58 of them. So there is a certain status of opposition, which puts a certain idea on the legislative work, but it doesn't mean that the faction should ignore the work of the parliament in general and should not participate in, shouldn't provide the laws for the laws, because 58 from 160, it's a high number. On the other hand, we have to go back and to remind one interesting conclusion. We discussed that in the parliament they have a record number of draft laws, 4.6 thousand. And if we look at who were authors, who prepared those draft laws, we have a very interesting trend, because 1/3 of all registered draft laws in 2016, they were provided by separate MPs, so 1/3. There is only one author who is of those draft laws. So an MP sits down and writes a draft law and registered, and we have absurd situation. For example, when an MP, Yevgeny Murayev, who is not in any faction, in September, November, registered 19 draft laws. He is alone who did it. Because of such draft laws with one author, they block the work of the parliament, because there is no limitation. So that's why our recommendation is we have to limit the right, restrict the right of legislative MPs, and we should provide that the author, it's not only one MP but a group of MPs, and the number should not be less than the smallest faction. For us, it would be 18 MPs. That would improve the quality of the work of the parliament, and that would encourage better discussion of all draft laws.
Thank you, dear colleagues. Maybe final remarks, so we start Q&A session. Do you have questions or comments? Please introduce yourself. Good morning, Maria Kucherenko, elections in Ukraine edition. Thank you very much for this report. I would like to ask how parliamentary parties, how did they take part in the elections of territorial united communities? Thank you for your question. If you look at statistics, you can see that local elections this year, about 50 political parties took part in this process. This is a good indicator, and it also testifies that in Ukraine we have more than 200 parties that do not work, and now anti-corruption committee cannot find where the heads of these units are in order to get reports from the number of artificially created parties in the system should be reformed, and for this we should carry out election reform and political reform, because further mistrust of political parties will increase. And if we are speaking about yesterday, I would like to say that yesterday we got a wave of applications, claims, information, claims on the different violations. Some people who were drunk came to polling stations, and also there were some problems with roofs and other facilities. And because of this information clutter, we didn't see key problems of elections. And these were the biggest elections from the elections that happened 2015. And the Committee of Voters of Ukraine identified 3 key problems that were on, during elections that happened on the 18th of December. So first, the criminality, then traditional bribing of voters, and administrative resource. So these are 3 main problems. And if we compare local elections of 18th of December, if we compare it with elections of 2015, we can see deterioration in quality of the process and violations. And if speaking about this process, we also found that there are resources in some territorial communities. There are resorts, big enterprises, some facilities. For example, Polyana territorial community, 2 days before elections, our committee addressed to the Ministry of Internal Affairs because they made pressure on one of the candidates because they some people burned facilities of this person. Also, there were some titushkas in this community. And also Nemirovo, Vinnytska Oblast, there was a big problem. There was fighting between different parties, and 2 people were hospitalized in the result. Also in Cherkasy region, we monitored black PR, and yesterday, on the day of elections, law enforcers reinforced security and public oblast in Mykolaiivka, Donetsk Oblast, because there were a lot of violations in the course of this election. As to bribery, we fixed 2 cases in Zakarpattia. First case, they provided envelopes with money, and in second case, this was bags with corn. And criminal proceedings were studied yesterday. The representative of our organization in Nemirovska community fixed 2 cases, and the law enforcers, we provided information to law enforcers. So there were many violations, and I'm speaking about those cases that can be 100% sure about. So we can see the facts of indirect bribing also. So and the third problem is the use of administrative resource. One of the heads of regional administrations in Odeshina campaigned for one of the candidates and counter-campaign against his opponent. And these materials, they were in the edition of local administration, and the issue of elections and quality of electoral process is the indicator how the state can counteract systemic traditional violations, how the state can oppose administrative resource bribing and law enforcers, whether they can fight criminality efficiently. And unfortunately, on the 18th of December, this process was of low quality, and we got a signal that the reform that was stated in the coalition agreement, and we see through our report that de facto old coalition work and Gvatyushina and Leshko party and Samopomich, they vote 50 or 70% together with BPP and People's Front. The coalition works, and it shows that this old coalition, they can realize this and implement this reform, and they can also provide rotation in the CEC. About CEC, we saw connected with several claims that the parliament should adopt decision and to change CEC membership. We believe that the draft laws submitted by the president based on proposals of the parliament, we see that this list is of low quality. Half of the candidates they do not have experience. They do not know how to organize election process. They do not know legislation in the sphere. And also in this list, there are no representatives of three factions of Ukrainian parliament. That's why we address the Supreme Council and the factions of the parliament to address the president in order that he revoked his draft provision, and the parliamentary factions should submit their renewed proposals as to CEC, and the president should introduce 12 draft laws as to CEC membership. And if the parliament now make this step, we theoretically in a short term, in several weeks, we will see renewed CEC list, and that will correspond to the challenges that CEC faces now. Thank you. Do you have questions or comments? So this is the end of press briefing. You can put your questions off records now. Dear colleagues, our next event